Welcome to Wake Up with Marci, a deep dive into self-discovery. I'm your host, Marci Hopkins, and this is the space where we get real about life, transformation, and finding our true selves. Amber, welcome to Wake Up with Marci. I'm so grateful you are here today.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
I got to tell you, you are doing great work. And I was reading some stuff that you had shared with me, and the one thing that really hit home was when you would say that family members would call and they were so worried about their loved one dealing with addiction, and like, how can they help? What can they do?
hmm
And
Right.
your
Yeah.
answer was they have to want it for themselves. And I myself have always said that. But you said to yourself, like, no, there's got to be another way, which is incredible.
Right. Because family members, one of the big things is I would get calls like, I really want my loved one to come see you, but I don't know how to get them to come see you. And I think that's where families get stuck. It's like, I know they need help, but they either don't think they need help or they they don't want to do it for all these other reasons. And so families get stuck. How do I get them to take those first few steps? And it's hard when you get
It is
told
hard.
over and over there's nothing you can do and they have to want it for themselves. And I was like, there's got to be something else, right? There's got to be a better answer. And I sort of got my start like just helping people at first, just having short conversations with people, like how do you set the stage and get them to come in, and giving them some tips and tricks on that. And then it grew into like bigger and bigger and bigger, where now I have like this whole like invisible intervention process if they're completely in denial. But I don't believe families are powerless. When it's your
Mm,
kid or it's your spouse or it's your
mhm.
sister, your best friend, that whole just stand back and hope they figure it out, that doesn't feel
No,
right to you.
it is a feeling of
Mhm.
being powerless. Absolutely. My mother was an alcoholic, and she was in and out of rehabs and halfway houses, and I don't know. I mean, like, I got sober,
Mhm.
and she was still drinking or in and out of these recovery centers, and she was just like, I don't know that I can get it. And I would talk in AA about it, and they would just say, be an example.
Mhm.
And actually that did work a little bit
Mhm.
for her, but it maybe, like you're saying, it's kind of an invitation, but it doesn't necessarily create the change for them. So I want to talk a little bit about you.
Sure.
And I mean, you're an addiction counselor, the founder of Hope for Families Recovery Center. So can you share with us, how did you get involved with this work, and why is it so important to you?
Well, most people in this profession, their story is all about why they got into this work. And my
Mhm.
story doesn't start there. My story starts with how I got to be any good at it. I come from an addicted family. My mother died of methamphetamine. I have a sister completely addicted. All my grandparents. I mean,
Wow,
there's
yeah,
way more people addicted than not addicted in my family.
I get it.
But and all
Mhm.
that's true, but that's not why I got in the field. So how I sort of ended up where I'm at is when I was a baby counselor straight out of counseling school. The first assignment I got was to create an intensive outpatient program for teenagers who were struggling with addictions.
Mm,
And I didn't know what I was doing, honestly. I was like straight out of counseling school. They don't teach you nothing about that in counseling school. You get one class on addiction. I don't think you get any classes on teenagers. You could literally have a master's degree in just teenagers, but you don't get anything about that. And um, they had given me this assignment because I had been a high school teacher while I was in counseling school.
mm.
And I wasn't about to tell them I didn't know what I was doing. This was my first job. So I was like, yeah, I'll do it. Design it. I got it. Because that's just who I am. I'm just one of those people
Fake
that
it
just
till you
jump
make it,
in
I guess,
blind.
right?
Yeah, I'm that girl. but you know what, Marcy? I ended up in this intensive outpatient program, which ran in the evenings
Mm,
at this hospital where there was like inpatient stuff going on. And it was kind of nice because like all the bosses were gone. It was kind of quiet. It was kinda nice that way, But
Mhm.
it was kind of hard that way too, because it was just me in this room, this tiny room that looked more like a long closet. There was barely enough room in this long little thing. I don't even know what I call it, for like a long table, kind of like the ones that you set up at a family reunion, with the fold out
Yeah.
legs.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, yeah.
Just think about like two or three of those just going straight down in a row, and about, I don't know, 12 to 15 chairs surrounding it. I mean, it was so tiny that if somebody in the back needed to go to the bathroom, everybody had to get up and push in their chair
Oh
for this
my.
person to get by. Right. And so the reason I tell you is just because it's me by myself. I'm barely like 20, I don't know, 3 something, 24 maybe, in this room with these teenagers who don't want to be there at all, trying to
Mhm.
figure out what in the world to do.
Yeah.
And I didn't have this really cool recovery story to get their attention. In fact, I wasn't even cool in high school, okay? And so I'm in there. These kids don't want to be in there. I'm trying to pretend like I know something. I don't know anything. And the first thing that I knew I had to figure out was just how to get them to show up,
Yeah.
because I didn't want, like my bosses and the other counselors and stuff to know. I didn't know what I was doing. And if nobody showed up, I knew everyone would know.
Yeah.
So I started concentrating on just purely how do I get these kids to show up?
Mhm.
Um, and that's hard because, first of all, it's hard to get anyone to show up for substance abuse, anything. It's really
Yeah.
hard.
Yeah.
And these are teenagers.
Yeah.
They don't, not only do they not want to get help with that, but they want to be with their friends. They don't want to be in this tiny room with some woman who's ridiculous or whatever. So the first thing I did is I made the group motto in my mind was, we like you more than they like you, meaning that it was my goal to make it an atmosphere where they felt like I and their other peers cared for them more than their using friends, right? And
Mm.
what happens is they do begin to feel connected to you and feel connected to the group. So I got where I was really good at getting these kids to show up. In fact, I just started this whole thing where it was like a mentor program, and if you graduated, you could keep coming back for free as long as you wanted to, as long as you weren't putting like other people at risk. And we outgrew our room. I mean, it got really crowded in there because these kids, not only did they come, but they just like kept coming back. A lot of times because they wanted to be mentors. Like that
Yeah.
was their goal, is they were like, oh,
Oh, they
that's
wanted to help
cool, I want to be
others.
one of them.
Yeah.
And so they would keep coming. And that was awesome because I felt like, oh, now I look like I know what I'm doing. I got these kids at least come in the room. And that
Mm.
is the most important thing when you're trying to help someone with addiction, is just getting them to show up. Because
Yeah.
what are you going to do if they won't show up? So that was sort of my lesson number one. And then that would have been good enough because I was, everybody thought, oh, she's doing great. Like, man, she's got so many kids in that program. I look like I knew I was doing. I still didn't. But the only problem was these dang parents. They would call my phone being totally heartbroken and desperate for me to help their kids. And you got somebody's mama on the phone with you in
Mhm.
tears. It's
Mhm.
Monday. They're telling me every crazy thing that happened over the weekend, how they're so scared. They don't know where their kid's at. The kid's not even answering the phone. And I mean, you get a sense of big time pressure on your shoulders. At least I did. Like I'm new. There's no one else in there with me helping me, and they want me to tell them what to do, and they're expecting me to wave this magic wand over their kids and make things better. So I had this
So
like,
helpless. Yeah.
yeah, I just, a lot of times in addiction recovery, other treatment professionals, their thing is they'll come back when they want it, right?
Mhm.
And they have, even though they're counselors and stuff, they have this attitude of, well, they're just not ready. They just haven't hit their bottom and all these
Yeah.
things.
Yeah.
So in a clinical way, I could kind of get by with that, but in a personal, like moral way, I couldn't get okay with that. Like I was
Mhm.
like, again, I was
It
like,
didn't sit
got
well with
to
you.
do
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
Like, I'm a little codependent. So these like people that want something out of me, I'm like, oh God, I gotta do it. So the problem was though, is that I knew that the parents were doing everything wrong. Not because they were bad parents. Most of the kids I had came from great families, but
Oh, I get
but
it.
because they're
Mhm.
scared to death, and when we're
Mhm.
scared, we tend to not make the best decisions. We get in our scared brain and not in our logical brain. So I had to figure out how to get these parents to understand what they were doing that would go against, what they wanted, and what they were doing that could help.
Mhm.
So I started working with a few parents at the time, and they kinda got the philosophies down, and they got it, and then what happened is then I created this whole parent mentor program. So the
Mm.
parents I'd already trained, they would keep coming and train the new parents. So I've got these
Wow.
4 almost like programs happening, and the parent program outgrew its room, and they met in the gymnasium. So
Mm.
this which
Mhm.
wasn't like a full high school gym size, but it was big in this
Yeah,
hospital. And
yeah.
so once we had all that going and we had the kids who would want to come and the parents who sort of got on board and they would help each other. And it was really cool because like other parents would help other teens. Cause you know how when you're a teen, it's just like you just don't want to listen to your parent, but you would listen
Mhm.
to someone else's parent. You know how that is.
100%.
It's crazy, right? You know, it was just like this whole huge community thing. And there was
Mhm.
a lot of connection and a lot of we're invested in each other's stories. And honestly, that is the magic thing. It's not it's not these certain techniques, it's not these certain lessons that you teach. It's this desire to stay connected to the group or to your family. Your relationship, I learned that your relationship is the leverage that you have. And so when you do things to ruin your relationship, you ruin your leverage. And it's through those experiences that I have figured out how to actually get through to people. And it's the opposite of what usually happens. What usually happens is, you know, you're telling this person, look, you're ruining your life, you're hurting your family. I can't believe, you know, your kids, you know, all these things. And that doesn't motivate people to want to do better.
Yeah,
That motivates people to avoid having conversations with you
yeah.
and to defend their position on what they're doing. And you never want to put a person with an addiction in a position to defend what they're doing. You don't want to
Mhm.
say anything to them that to make them give you the other side of that argument because every time they do, they're reinforcing it in their mind that much more.
Yeah.
And so you got to figure out how to come at someone to help them connect with who they are and their own values. Because it is true. People
Mhm.
do have to want to do it, but there are a lot of ways to get someone to wanna do it.
So let's talk about that. You were saying, you know, parents doing the wrong things, right? Either enabling or getting angry and telling them how wrong they are, and that could be any age.
Right,
And
right, that's right.
then right, and then how you're affecting someone, that's talking to you or a loved one in the family or whatever, and then when the person and I am guilty of this, you then drink at the problem of or the person.
Oh,
It
yeah, I love that. Drink at the person. You're so right, Marcy. I call that a "I'll get drunk at
right,
you," right,
like
episode. Yeah,
"Excuse me, but screw you,"
yeah.
"You're the one with the problem."
Now I'm
And
drinking even more just to make you mad, right?
exactly,
Yeah,
exactly, and with children, especially teenagers,
yeah.
I mean, they've got all kinds of hormonal issues going on, their brains aren't fully formed, and they don't know how to really make good decisions in their lives. So let's backtrack a little bit.
Mhm,
Now, you were talking about parents. First of all, I want to ask, how do we know if our teen actually has a drinking problem,
mhm.
or if they or are just experimenting and it gets out of control sometimes?
That's a super good question because, you know, teens do all that experimentation, and it is hard to tell, you know, is this just kids being kids? Is this
Mhm,
something bigger?
mhm,
And, you know, so that but I'll give you the short answer is when they start giving up everything else for that, that's a
mm,
problem, right?
mhm,
When they've always loved this sport or they've always been best friends with this person or they have this girlfriend and they just start giving up or they always, like, had a great relationship with their grandpa and they just start giving up everything and their world becomes more and more and more narrow. And as you're watching that, they'll give you a million reasons for it. You know, well, I stopped hanging out with them because of this reason. Well, I quit baseball because, you know, I'm just burned out. And any one of those is fine. But when you start seeing that progressively in a lot of categories and it's just narrowing,
mhm.
it's starting to take over their life. It's starting to become the primary motivator and factor in their life, as opposed to a kid who still has all these friends, they're still going to this and that, and they go out, or maybe they have a friend they smoke weed at a party or something like that. It's a different what's going on behind the scenes is they're obsessing about it. What
Mhm.
you'll see on the outside, as a family member is just that they just lose interest in other things, and you can tell even when they engage in other things, they don't really want to, and they're sort of faking it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, well, let's talk about the families. I mean,
Sure.
how can they start to take the action? You know, what are some of those steps that they can start taking to kind of, well, I don't know, regain control of something that's very out of control?
Right. Well, I I I usually say the first step is to get out of the bag of barrel, but really the thing you have to do for that is you have to get your fear under control a little bit,
Mm,
because that's what's driving you to get into the bag of roll, because you're scared to death and you're trying to make this person, whether they're a young person, a grown person, all the things I'm telling you, one of the things I learned from working with teens, it's the same across the board. I don't care how old you are. It's easier with adults than kids, but it's all the same principles. But um, is you you just want them to wake up and see that they're headed for disaster, and you're so scared, and because you're so scared you try to make them figure it out really quick, so you just start trying to tell them the answer, and
mm,
that's where things go awry, and that's where this sort of power struggle starts. So the first thing you gotta do is you have to stay out of the bad guy role, and you have to let the world be the bad guy
mm,
and you be the consultant or the coach or the good guy if you want to. But that doesn't mean you fix everything for them. What most families want to do is they want to fix the trouble that you get into. They want to get you a lawyer, they want to call your teacher and ask for some extra credit. They want to do all the things, but be really mad at you inside the context of the relationship. They're critical of you, they're nagging you, they're yelling at you, they're telling you how you're messing everything up all the time. And that's the opposite. The formula that gets people to figure it out
yeah.
is you do have to have the consequences, but it's way better if those consequences don't come from you. When
Mm,
those consequences come from you, it's called punishment. Those are not consequences, it's punishment. And
right. Yeah.
punishment doesn't create learning, it creates resentment. And so sometimes you can force a person into being compliant, but you cannot force someone into recovery.
No.
And so when you're trying to take all these privileges away and you're trying to
Mhm.
force this and control the friends and all these things, what happens is a person just gets stuck power struggling with you. And they're so distracted by that, they cannot even see the problem. So you have to get out of the bag of roll, step number one.
Mhm.
Then you have to build credibility. I call it building credit, kinda like building your credit score because you wanna buy a house at some point or
Yeah.
something.
Uh-huh.
And so the way you do that is you have to get a person to really know that you get where they're coming from and that you understand them. Because most of the time we know that our family loves us.
Yeah.
Most of the time we know that. But we're not gonna listen to their advice if we think they don't get it. Like, we know our grandma loves us, but we're probably not gonna take grandma's advice if we think she doesn't understand what we're dealing with, right? So
Yeah.
you have to really, like, convince someone that you get where they're coming from. In order to do that, you have to actually get where they're coming from, which means you have to do a lot of reflective listening and empathy statements, and, "Yeah, I can see where you're coming from. I can see why that would upset you." You know, and it's just hard because your instinct is to automatically wanna tell them why that's the wrong answer.
Mhm.
But once you are out of the bag of roll and you build credibility, they actually care what you think, and they actually listen to your opinions and advice because you have credibility, because
Mhm.
you understand all the uniqueness of their situation. You don't jump to conclusions, you don't force the situation, then it removes the distraction, allows them to see the problem, and then it puts you in a role of influence, back into a role of influence.
I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it kinda goes back to, like, what I talk a lot about. I mean, communicating with somebody else, how
Mhm.
you do it, the tone, the words that you use, you either put them on the defense or they open up to what you're saying.
Mhm.
And as a parent, we just wanna say, "Well, it's because I'm the parent, this is
Right.
right. I know best. I've lived this long."
Right.
But it's not
And
about
you
that.
probably do. I mean, you do know best.
Right.
You have lived longer, but because you know what they should do is a different skill than getting them to do it. It's 2 different skills. Yeah, you're so right, Marcy.
Yeah. Yeah. So one of the things that you shared with me is about the 5 steps ahead of addiction.
Right.
And I would love if you could expand more on that because I don't know. I mean, I just from my experience, like I started drinking really early in my life. My
Mm,
mom, she was probably doing drugs, but it was more about alcohol. My grandfather drank all the time. I was just always around partying. So it
mhm.
actually was very normalized in my life.
Oh, right.
And
Yeah.
right? And then like the first time I drank, I was 12. It was at my mom's 3rd wedding. And I don't even remember getting in trouble in any way. And then it's like bad things were happening to me in my family and in my home. My mom wasn't keeping me safe. So was drinking because of that. And I had to manage that throughout my life.
Mhm.
So I guess addiction can start very early and it can already be within us genetically. So I'm really curious to hear how we can stay ahead of that as
Mhm.
a family, especially when we know that there is addiction that runs rampant in our family.
So are you talking about, Marcy, like preventing addiction or, getting ahead of it once it's in play?
Well, I guess both. If you can answer both, that would be amazing.
Okay. I can answer it better the second half, which is what to do when it's already in play. That whole
Okay.
preventing it thing, that's a
I
whole
know
'nother
that's a
story.
whole
It's really
different
deep.
I'll
That's a
have you on another
we
time for
could do
that one.
5 episodes on that. But once it's in play, as
Yeah.
far as getting 5 steps ahead of it is, instead of you gotta get out of this crisis management of trying to control today. I mean, it gets to the point where you won't leave the house because you feel like you gotta babysit them.
Yes.
Or if they're not there, then you're looking through all their stuff, you're spying on them, you're trying to find the answers, and so you're consumed
Mhm.
with finding out what's happening and proving that you know what's happening. Because the addicted person's gonna gaslight you, they're gonna tell you you're crazy, and so you get caught in this whole thing about, "See, I got proof." You think you're gonna make them admit it, but it never works. And so you gotta get out of that here and now crisis management zone and get ahead of it. And what I mean by that is you gotta think about what's gonna happen tomorrow, and then what's gonna happen the next day, and you gotta think 3 steps down the road, and then I'm gonna set, I wanna call it a trap, but it's not a trap, but, like, I'm gonna set the stage for what's going to happen then.
Mhm.
Like for example, one of the things that I teach families is almost anyone struggling with an addiction has to go through what I call a bargaining phase. No
Mm.
one just says, "Oh, I got a problem, I'm gonna quit completely,"
Yeah.
and then that's it. Like, that doesn't happen.
Doesn't
That's a
happen.
myth. It never happens. People have to try a lot of different things. I mean, it's
Mhm.
natural to wanna, like, cut it back. The
Yeah.
last thing you wanna do is give it up completely,
Yeah.
especially when you go to an addiction counselor, they say, "Oh, now you have to give that up, but you gotta give it all up, and your friends, and your lifestyle, everything." I mean,
Yeah.
that's the last thing people wanna do.
And the
So,
reason why, guys out there, those are triggers. That's why.
yeah, there's a lot of good reasons for
There's
that,
a lot behind it. Yeah.
but there's a I mean, it's reasonable that someone doesn't wanna have to upheave everything and let go
Mhm.
of every single thing. I mean, that's natural, we would all be like that. So,
Yeah.
what you have to do is you have to have tolerance for letting people go through these phases, and if you and I'm not saying you have to encourage it, but you have to sort of let them check these boxes, and if you let them check the boxes, they'll go through them faster. For
Mm.
example, like when your husband has a drinking problem and he comes home and he says, "I know I've been drinking too much lately. I'm gonna cut it back. From now on, I'm just gonna drink on the weekends. Or from now on, I'm not gonna drink more than X amount. Or from now on, I'm just gonna drink beer and not liquor." These are all bargaining statements, and you could apply that to any drug you want to. It's all the same. It happens the same.
Yeah.
Your instinct is gonna wanna be to jump in there and say something like, "You already tried that. You know it doesn't work," blah, blah, and you're
Uh,
just gonna wanna jump against it. But then again, you put them in a position to defend that point of view, and they're reinforcing it themselves. So it's like, I'm trying to get this person out of denial, but you're helping them to reinforce the denial when you do that. So the way I like to handle things like that is I like to say, "You know what? I think you're right. Like, if you could cut it back to just on the weekends or if it's just a few beers here and there, like, I don't think there's a problem with that." And then you say, "Let's do it." In my case, I'd say, "Let's write that down in your treatment plan," or something like that. In a family's case, you could say, "Yeah, I think you're right. I think that would make things better." It ain't gonna work. Okay,
Right.
yeah, spoiler alert here. It's not gonna work. But you gotta let someone try those things and see for themselves that the whole cutting it back thing or the switching from this alcohol to that alcohol, it may work like very temporarily, but it doesn't work for long. And when you get aligned with them and it doesn't work, they're not gonna see you as a threat. They're not gonna see you that they're gonna have be open to talking to you about it because they know they're not gonna get an "I told you so." So when it doesn't work, instead of then jumping, because at that point, your instincts are gonna wanna say, "Okay, now we learned the lesson. Let's quit or let's go to treatment," right?
Yeah.
I don't want you to do that. I want you to say something more along the lines of, "I have a lot of respect for how motivated you are to make sure that this problem doesn't take over,"
Mhm.
right? "I really respect that you keep pulling yourself back up and that you're not giving up on figuring it out." Because when you say something like that to someone instead of, "Well, your way isn't working,"
Mm.
you're taking that motivation that they already have and you're growing it. It's like a seed and you're pouring water on it. And
Mm.
then they get even more committed. And so now they're not in this power struggle with you. Now they're trying to show up for you. It just
Mhm.
it just turns the whole thing upside down if you know what to say and when to say it. But you gotta get ahead of it. Stop trying to prove what's going on right now. In fact, when your loved one does the bargaining, the last thing I want you to do is help make that work. So when they say, "I'm only gonna drink on the weekends," and then it's Thursday night and they're drinking, you're gonna wanna say, "I thought you said you're only gonna drink on the weekends."
Yes.
Okay, that's a terrible idea because they might listen to you and they might not drink then, and then it's just that much longer till we're gonna figure out that bargain isn't gonna work. Now you're slowing down the process. Or worse, they're gonna drink anyway, but they're gonna be so focused on being mad at you, they're not gonna be realizing that they're crossing their own boundary. So it's
Mhm.
like a completely opposite way from your instincts of dealing
Mhm.
with it, but it makes things go so much faster.
Oh, again, the way that you say it, I love that. There's so much power in that. And it just all I kept thinking of was myself during because guys, this doesn't happen overnight. You don't
Right.
like just decide that you have a problem.
Right.
You are recognizing that something's not right. You're
Mhm.
questioning yourself, and even as a teen, like you're questioning what you're doing,
Mhm.
mistakes that you're making. How can I make changes without quitting drinking? Because the idea of never drinking again is so looming. Like you can't even imagine that,
Oh,
right? Like
yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
And so you start looking for different ways that maybe you can drink normally,
Mhm.
air quotes here, whatever that normal is.
Mhm.
And you start exploring all these different ways. And then you do it for me, like I finally had to get to a place where I just felt so much shame and guilt about what I was doing
Mhm.
that then I tried to go to AA because I didn't
Mhm.
wanna be like my mom,
Mhm.
and I saw myself kinda going down that path. But then I started another thing that we do, we start comparing our stories to other people. Once I was in the rooms, and this is something that we can do as an alcoholic, is we start comparing our stories to other people, and I'm like, "Well, that's not bad. I'm not that bad. I'm not drinking in the morning. I'm not drinking all day.
Mhm.
So I must not be an alcoholic. I'm not my mom, so I
Yeah.
convinced myself I wasn't an alcoholic. I convinced my husband and other people in my life were like, "Oh, I don't know that you really have a problem." Well, I will tell you in that year,
Mhm.
my drinking elevated to a point like it's like a slippery slope, right?
Mhm.
It's like you're drinking uh, one way and then all of a sudden, oh, now you're hiding alcohol because your y your loved one doesn't want you to be drinking, so now you're
Mhm.
trying to hide it,
Right.
right? Or trying to pretend that you're not doing it, and then
Mhm.
you're only thinking about it more, and
Right.
then it's almost like you're doing it more, so it's like this constant battle, like,
Right.
it is driving you insane,
It's exactly
and
it. Marci. It's an obsession.
It is. It
Mhm.
is. And it is so hard. I mean, like I said, I've been on both sides. And a lot of times I get asked, what do you say as a family member, right? Or what can I do to make the change? And my husband really couldn't do much.
Mhm.
But I will say the verbiage and the way that you say things is so important, because when he would get mad at me, that's when I
Mhm.
would drink more. If he told me that I just want you to be healthy for the family and for us, it landed differently.
Mhm.
So I'm just reinforcing what you're
Right.
saying is so
Right.
true.
Right. Because it what I love what you said, Marcy, about the shame and guilt just grew and
Mhm,
grew to the point where I went to my first meeting or whatever.
mhm,
And that happens in people naturally if you let it. But
mhm.
when you're in this power struggle with them, they all they can think and feel is resentment, hurt, anger. That becomes the other part of the obsession
Yeah.
is this self-pity resentment cycle. And that keeps people stuck in it so much longer. And when we can kind of let someone's own conscious kick in,
Mhm.
it will, if they've got a conscience, and most people do, it will kick in if we let it. It's hard. I
Yeah.
mean, these techniques are simple, but they're not easy. You know,
No, they're
you have
not
to go against
easy.
all your instincts. It's not
Yeah.
easy.
Yeah. So we're talking about how, let's say, parents can help their teens, or just help our loved ones by the
Mhm.
words we're using and these steps. But what about those that are dealing with the one that has the addiction? Like, they need help and support too. So
Right.
how can they get the help that they need?
I think you make a really good point because a lot of the things I teach, or almost all the things I teach, have to do with what does the addicted person need. And if you're the
Mhm.
family member, you're like, dude, the whole house is running around them already. I'm already taking up all the responsibilities. Like, what the heck? Now you want me to be nicer to them?
Yeah.
You know, that's what you're thinking. And that's a super valid point, right? We need somebody we can talk to that
Mhm.
understands. But that's tricky too because if you go around talking to everyone in your family about it, your loved one, boy, that's going to get you in the bag I roll immediately and in a way that you're not going to get out of because that's, you can't tell everyone your loved one is going to feel super betrayed about that. So
Yeah.
it's hard. And then when you do talk to people, it sometimes as the family member it makes you feel worse because people are like, well, if I was you, I'd tell you what I'd do, and they have all this attitude. And I'm like, whatever, you
No,
don't know
like
what
they
you
have
do.
no idea.
I don't know what I do. If it's my son, I know what I should do.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
don't know, like, and you hear people, I call it the big talk, like, or you feel like they're secretly judging you. Maybe they're being nice, but you feel like they're secretly looking down their nose at you. Um, or sometimes it's so painful just to hear about other people's lives going well and you're hurting so badly.
Yeah.
It's you withdraw and you shut down. So it's hard to find the right kind of support.
Mhm.
It's very hard, right? But I think it's 2 things. It's finding that support, that place you can lean on to feel heard and understood and not lose yourself completely to the addiction because it's really hard for you to stay out of the bag I roll when you've given everything away. You don't have anything left because then you're so resentful. You can't stop staying out of the bag of rolls. So you need that care for yourself. But also, I think understanding what you're doing and having a strategy feels very empowering and it does
Mhm.
give you a little bit of hope.
It
And
does.
just knowing what your plan is and that you have a plan and that it's a plan that works
Mhm.
gives you a little bit more strength and energy and helps you feel like I can do this a little bit longer, especially when you're really realistic about what you're going to expect. Because, like I said, we're not dealing with today, we're dealing with, next week and next week. Because the one thing about addiction is it's very predictable. Like you can
Mhm.
tell me how old someone is and what substance they're using and what they've done for the past 3 weeks, and I could tell you what they're gonna do tomorrow. Like, and it is not just me, anybody that understands addiction could, right? Because it's a predictable pattern. So if you get
Yeah.
out of that fear, you can say, "All right, then what's gonna happen? Then what's gonna happen? And let's plan for this, and let's set the stage for this to happen when we get
Mhm.
here. Now we got it.
Mhm. So where can someone that needs help, like let's say there's a parent out there, a caregiver,
Mhm.
with their teen, where can you suggest that they go to get help or find out information about it? And then where can the family member or the loved one go to find some support?
Well, I think the traditional answer to that is Al-Anon,
Mhm.
and I love Al-Anon. There's a lot of really good support there. The only reason I'm hesitant to say it is because I think sometimes if you're the family member, it can almost feel offensive when someone tells you to go to Al-Anon
Yeah,
because it's like, I'm not the one with the problem. Now you want me to go to a meeting
I
and
know.
and I'm doing all this other, and so, I'm just super careful about how I say that. But these days, there's more than just Al-Anon. Like,
Yeah.
I just got back, yesterday from a conference, from a program called Hope is Alive, and it's huge, and they have all of these support groups for family members all over. There's all just like there's all different kinds of recovery support these days, there's all different kinds of support for family members.
There is. There is. I love that there's so much support out there now, and it's not just rehab, AA, and Al-Anon.
Right.
Um,
Right. Not that those things are wrong, but, I
no,
mean,
there
it's good that
listen,
there's a lot of flavors out there because there's a lot of
yeah,
different situations out there.
AA worked for me, saved my life.
Right.
Um, and, uh, and listen, but Al-Anon, I like your perspective. Al-Anon was a little different for me. It was like, just gotta shut my mom out, and maybe that at the time, that was what I needed to do. But I love that there is so much out there, and I don't know. I just say get educated, get educated, get educated. And at that we're gonna offer your information too, because you
Yeah, sure.
obviously are incredible doing what you do. So can you share there's a few little questions that I want to answer, some bonus questions, if you will.
Yeah.
So what are some signs that a loved one may be ready to seek help?
Usually, what you'll hear is the clinical way of calling it is change talk. And that's when they make these little statements to you like, I need to cut it back, or man, I really messed up again last night. And they start making these, they don't usually come out and say, I want to go to rehab. In fact, they never come out and say, I want to go to rehab.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
okay, I guess maybe, but rarely. Okay. Very,
yeah,
very.
very, yeah,
When we're there, it's real far.
yeah.
But they make these other little statements about, like I said, wanting to cut it back or wanting to stay away from certain people or certain situations. And when you hear change talk, that is someone moving through the stages of change and
Mhm,
usually indicates that someone is either moving into those bargaining stages, like we talked about earlier,
mhm,
or coming out of those bargaining stages where they're really ready to go the distance and do the thing, you know?
mhm,
And so you wanna listen carefully for those. And when you
mhm.
hear them and when you see them, those are little seeds, and you wanna nurture those little seeds and grow them. And I think that's Al-Anon and a lot of these other programs. I don't wanna say anything bad because I really do think, gosh, they've helped more people than anybody, you know?
Yeah,
And
yeah,
so but they give you half of the story, which is the get out of the power struggle role, but they don't give you this other half about the things that you can do.
yeah,
Like when someone says that, a great question is, well, what makes you feel that way? You know, when someone says, I need to cut it back or I need to stop hanging out with that person,
yeah,
instead of saying, damn right you do, which I know is what you want to say, you say, what makes you think that? Because then you're getting the person to start articulating to you the
mm,
reasons behind why they want to, which is reinforcing that. And then you're
mhm,
asking them more questions. And then you might say something like, well, how would you go about that?
yeah,
Well, that might be hard. What would you do about X, Y, or Z? You know, and then you're leading their thinking and you're reinforcing their thinking in such a way where they're convincing themselves and they're figuring out the steps they need to take and they're telling themselves why they need to take them and they're figuring out how they're going to overcome the roadblocks. So it's a matter of taking that change talk, nurturing it. Sometimes I say it's like a thread on your sweater and you start to pull it and you just gently just pull it, pull it, pull it, pull it, you know, and then it just goes
yeah.
further and further and further.
Do you have these on your website?
I
Please
have
do.
all of this stuff is in the YouTube videos, gosh, I'm just everywhere. I've got like 1,000 videos on YouTube. I'm on
So, yeah,
Facebook,
that's what I wanted to
Instagram,
ask
everywhere.
you.
Yeah.
Wanted to ask you if someone is at the end of their rope, what's some encouragement you could give them?
You know what? I see people beat this thing every single day, and I hate it when people give these super negative statistics and they say 1 in 10 people beat this thing. I see people beat this thing every day. I've
Mhm.
seen lots of teenagers give it up and like
Yeah,
turn their life around and be productive humans, like
yeah,
amazingly, go to college, do all
yeah.
these things. I, I think people are just generally negative, and I think that being negative about it only like creates a self-fulfilling prophecy, and I think it's
Mhm.
ridiculous. I see
Yeah,
people do it every single day, and when you look for what's working and you nurture it, it grows. Like when someone's been to treatment and then they fail a couple of times, then, their inclination is to think, "Well, that doesn't work for me," and your inclination is to think, "Well, you tried that, didn't work." My inclination is to say, "Well, dude, you stayed sober for 8 months after that one treatment, so
yeah,
clearly it did work.
yeah,
Clearly you knew exactly what you were doing." And they're like, "Yeah,
yeah.
I guess it did. When I was doing these things, it did." You see, when you come at someone when you're figuring out what's going right and you reinforce that, they feel more hopeful, you feel more hopeful, your relationship is so much better,
Mhm,
and
mhm.
and we have movement in the right direction. And the things I teach are not gonna get every single person sober, although it the research shows that these methods are way more effective than the other, like, tough love kinda things out there.
Yeah,
But even if it doesn't fix everything, you will feel better about who you are, you will feel
mhm.
good about how you interacted with the situation,
Yeah,
and your loved one will usually feel a lot better. So, it's
yeah,
kinda like it's gonna give you the best chance of it working, but if nothing else, your side of the street is clean and you don't have a lot of woulda,
yeah,
shoulda, coulda, because family members get mad at themselves the same way people with addictions do when they mess up, because they know, they lost their cool, they said all the things, they did,
yeah.
and then they feel bad, and so they're in the cycle of shame, guilt, remorse,
Mhm.
resentment too. We're in this
Yeah,
parallel, and so I
yeah,
I I say don't listen to that negative stuff. I've
yeah,
seen people
I
turn it
and
around like that you think, I mean, even I think, and usually they turn it around right when I'm like, "Okay, this one isn't gonna work," and I'm, like, ready to give it up. Like, that's usually the moment where they finally get it. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, and just, relapse is normal when it
Oh,
comes
yeah.
to this,
Mhm.
and it's a symptom, so there's a reason why usually somebody's doing drugs or alcohol, it's masking something else, so it's really about creating how you think between here.
Mhm.
Mm, I had to do a lot of work, takes a lot of action and kind of, well, not kind of, I had to rewire my whole thinking thought process. So
Right.
there is a lot of work once you put down the drink, and I just want you to know it's not willpower. Okay, please don't think that. So tell us real quick about your YouTube channel, and I was so
Yeah.
excited that I got to be on your YouTube
You
channel, and
sure
you
were.
do, yeah,
Yeah.
you do give such incredible advice.
The YouTube channel is called Put the Shovel Down, as in you hit your bottom when you put your shovel down, so you can stop anytime you want to. You do not have to keep digging. You do not have to hit bottom.
Yeah.
um, and there are videos on there for both sides of the street. So we like to look at it from every angle and to help families get back on the same team instead of working against each other. Because I truly feel like that's what keeps this whole thing going on as long as it goes.
Mhm. Yeah. And SoberLink alcohol monitoring technology, can you share about that?
Oh, I can share that. Now you're gonna get me really excited.
I
So,
love that. I'm so excited to hear about it.
I love SoberLink. I've been using SoberLink with clients for way before I was doing YouTube videos, for a very long
Mhm.
time, and they are an alcohol monitoring system. When I say system, not device, because you can get an alcohol breathalyzer anywhere. You can get it at CVS, Walmart, Amazon, whatever. But this is a whole system that's really pretty high tech. You can't cheat it. It has facial recognition in it, so every time you take the test, it, makes sure that it's you, like your phone won't unlock without your face, kinda like that. And
Yeah.
so, um, the way it works is you usually identify, like, a support person. For my clients, I'm their support person, but it can be anybody. It can be your best friend who's in recovery. It can be your sponsor. It can be your brother, whoever you is supportive of you and, has a good head on their shoulders about how to react to things. You set up a support person, and then you set up this schedule for when you're going to be tested. And usually I recommend 3 times a day in the beginning. And it's not, the purpose isn't to catch anyone doing anything. I don't want to catch anyone doing anything. That doesn't do any good. What are you going to do after the fact? The purpose is to prevent it. And when I set up SoberLink, it's not because I'm trying to make someone not do it. It's their choice to get 5 steps ahead of it. It's like they're saying, I know I'm going to have bad days, and I'm going to put this in place because I know on those bad days when, if it were just my willpower, I would give in, then I won't, because I have this accountability thing in place. So they get a text message that tells them when their test is due. They have an hour window to take the test. So almost all the people that I've had on SoberLink, they're working, they're going to school, they're raising kids. It's totally doable because it's not like you have to take it right now. You can stop, you can excuse yourself, go to the restroom. It takes, 10 seconds, 20 seconds or something, to do the whole thing. Okay. And then when you take your test, your results get uploaded into the SoberLink cloud, kind of like the iPhone cloud or whatever. And if you fail a test or you miss a test or you're late or whatever, your support person will get a notification. And so what it does for people is it makes it a lot easier to stay sober for 2 main reasons. One is when you're trying to do it without that, you have to make the decision 300 times a day. And then your husband goes, to the Target, and he's got errands to run. He's going to get his tire changed, and you're thinking, oh, he's not going to be back for 4 hours. I can have 2 drinks, and then I'll stop drinking at 4 o'clock, and then I'll be totally sober. You do all this math, you do all these deals with yourself. Right? And when you don't have something keeping you in check, you fight with it so hard, and it's so exhausting. And even when you are 100% committed and you mean it, we all run out of fuel sometimes, if we've had a bad day, if we're having a lot of triggers, a bazillion things. And so when you put this in place, you like literally make the decision once. And then you don't have to do all this arguing with yourself. And man, that makes it so much easier. It frees it up.
It is exhausting.
You don't get away with it. You don't do all this sneaky, sketchy planning like our brains just do. That's the big way it makes it easier for you. And I mean, it does. And then the other way is because then your family knows that it's being handled. And oh my God, that makes your life better because they get off your back. They stop with the smell text. They stop with the constant questioning and the following you around and the looking at where you're at on the phone, my friend. Oh my God. And then that pressure coming off is like, whoa.
And so it's just, you've got an accountability partner with this, and that really helps. You don't feel like you're doing it alone. And I know it's really hard for a loved one to trust you after you've let them down multiple times, like a million times,
Yeah, right.
So so anyway, I've been I don't know. I'm so grateful that you've come on and we've had this conversation, and I feel like we could just talk for hours, and I would love to have you back because I feel like there's just so much more we can touch on. But if you can just tell us, like, what's the best place for somebody to go to find you?
I would say YouTube is the best. It's the place to start. There are playlists on my channel specifically for people trying to overcome certain addictions, playlist for parents, playlist for partners. And so you can kind of find where you're at in the journey. And then, maybe your struggle is with boundaries, or maybe your struggle is with enabling. There are playlists on those topics, and kind of get the information that you're looking for. Maybe parts of it, but you need this other part, and it's all there. It doesn't cost anything. You can get it anytime, day or night. It's right there.
Yeah. There's hope, and get educated. It really is so powerful.
Yeah.
So thank you for doing that work and putting that out there. And drop the shovel on YouTube, correct?
Put the shovel down. That's right. Put the shovel
down. I'm sorry.
Yeah, quit digging that hole.
Shovel down.
Yeah, quit digging. That's right.
Exactly. Okay. Again, Amber, thank you so much for coming on Wake Up. And please share this with somebody. If you've heard this, you've listened or watched on YouTube, share with someone that needs to know This is such valuable information, and addiction is rampant, but there's help and there's hope. And as a family member, I know how hard it can be. I have been on both sides, and you can feel like there's nothing that you can do, but there really is. And we have wonderful people like Amber that is supporting us and giving us such valuable information to create change in our lives. So thank you again, Amber. And everyone out there, keep it real, be honest with yourself. This is your opportunity to create change and take a deep dive into self discovery and wake up to all the possibilities in your life. And I'll see you next time.
Bye, everybody.